Welcome to Coming the HFY, where ordinary humans quietly break the limits the galaxy thought were unbreakable. If you enjoy stories like this, make sure you subscribe, because your support keeps these stories coming. Now let me tell you about ceilings, because every system has one, every crew has one, and every commander believes in them until the moment they shatter. My name is Elias Vance, and I have spent most of my life inside machines that other people trusted but didn't truly understand. And if there is one thing I've learned, it's that a system's ceiling is never the edge of possibility. It's just the edge of what someone expected. Captain Saren Kale had been running deep space operations for nearly 2 decades, and she had a ceiling for every species aboard her ship. Not out of arrogance but experience, the kind of practical understanding that lets a commander survive in places where mistakes don't get corrected, they get buried. Her ceiling for humans was clear, adaptable, creative, useful under pressure, but inconsistent, better as support than as foundation, and she had seen enough examples to believe it without question, which is why when I boarded the survey vessel Heliios Drift as her 5th human crew member, she already knew exactly where I fit, or at least she thought she did. She explained it on my 2nd day, not as a limitation, but as an assignment briefing, outlining where I would be useful and where others would carry the weight, and I nodded, said I understood, and got to work. Because arguing with ceilings is pointless. Ceilings don't move because you talk about them, they move when reality forces them to. The Heliios Drift was a long-range survey vessel operating deep in the outer regions, far from any immediate support, a ship built for endurance rather than speed, with a crew small enough that every role mattered and every mistake echoed, and I spent my first few weeks doing what I always do. Learning the ship, not just the systems I was assigned, but everything, tracing wiring paths, reading historical logs, understanding how each component behaved under normal conditions, because normal is the only thing that lets you recognize abnormal before it becomes a problem. Captain Kale noticed, of course. Commanders always do, but she didn't interfere, because curiosity is not a violation, and thoroughness is rarely a problem. The moment everything changed came on day 39 of the mission, during a low-activity cycle when most of the ship was running on reduced staffing, and the navigation array began doing something subtle enough that no alarm triggered, no error message appeared, nothing that would make an automated system question itself, because the data it produced wasn't obviously wrong, it was just slightly off. The kind of off that stays hidden unless you're looking at the long pattern instead of individual readings. I had been watching it for 3 days by then, comparing the array outputs with independent stellar mapping data, noticing a divergence that grew slowly, almost invisibly, like a crack forming under pressure, and I didn't report it immediately because 1 day of drift can be calibration, 2 days can be coincidence, but 3 days is a pattern. When I finally filed a report, it was during the night cycle, and the bridge officer on duty, a Varelian named Tarek, did exactly what he was supposed to do. He checked the data, confirmed the discrepancy, and called the captain. She arrived fast, faster than protocol required, which told me she understood the seriousness before she even saw the numbers, and when she reviewed the data, she reached the same conclusion I had, that the navigation array had been providing slightly incorrect positional data for days, meaning every course correction made during that time had compounded the error, pushing the ship gradually off its intended path without anyone realizing it. She looked at me then, not with suspicion, but with focus, the kind that measures capability in real time, and asked how long I had been tracking it, and when I said 3 days, she paused, not because the number was impressive, but because it didn't fit the ceiling she had assigned me. The problem was simple in theory and dangerous in practice. The ship was no longer where it believed it was, and continuing on the current course would lead us directly toward a dense asteroid cluster at the edge of the survey zone, not immediately catastrophic, but risky enough that entering it without accurate navigation would be a gamble no competent commander would take. The solution was equally clear and equally difficult: abandon the faulty navigation array and calculate a manual course correction using stellar mapping data, a process that required time, precision, and the kind of sustained focus most crews avoided because the automated systems made it unnecessary. She asked how long it would take, and I told her 4 to 5 hours, depending on how thorough we wanted the redundancy checks to be, and then she asked if I could do it. And I said yes because I had done it before, and because there was no reason not to. What followed was exactly what you'd expect, Hours of calculation, cross-referencing star positions, adjusting vectors, verifying drift rates, building a correction sequence that would realign the ship without introducing new errors. And while the process itself wasn't dramatic, the stakes were, because every number had to be right, not mostly right, not acceptable, but exact. When I finished, I checked it 3 times, using different reference points each time, and when all 3 results matched, I handed it over. Captain Kale verified it herself, then had Tarek verify it again, and only then did she authorize the course correction. The ship shifted, engines adjusting our trajectory with controlled precision, and over the next several minutes, the stellar mapping data began to align with our intended position, confirming that we were back on course and no longer drifting toward the hazard zone. The crisis ended quietly, the way most real crises do, not with explosions or alarms, but with the absence of disaster. A few hours later, I was back in the maintenance corridors, continuing the work I had been doing before any of this happened, because the job doesn't stop when one problem is solved, and that's where Captain Kale found me. She stood there for a moment, watching, not interrupting, and when I finished what I was doing and turned to face her, she asked about the baseline data, about how long I had been comparing it, and why, and I told her the truth. I watch everything, not because it's my assignment, but because it's part of the system, and if you're responsible for a system, you don't ignore parts of it just because someone didn't list them in your role description. She listened, really listened, and then she said something that mattered more than the course correction, more than the saved mission. She said the ceiling she had assigned me was wrong. Not because her data had been bad, but because it had been incomplete, and I told her what I believe about ceilings, that they're not wrong, they're just temporary, built from what we know until something shows us more. She asked why I hadn't challenged it earlier, and I said because words don't move ceilings, actions do, and she understood that. I could see it in the way her posture shifted, the way her certainty adjusted, not broken but expanded. Then she told me my assignment was being revised, and when I asked to what, she said, to whatever the ship needs, and that was the moment the ceiling disappeared, not just for me, but for how she would see every human after me. I went back to work after that because that's what you do. You keep watching, you keep learning, you keep making sure the system works the way it's supposed to, because out here, in the vast empty spaces between stars, survival doesn't come from what you're assigned to do. It comes from what you choose to notice, and the truth is simple. The ceiling was never the limit, it was just the line no one had crossed yet. And if you want more stories where humans quietly rewrite what the galaxy thinks is possible, don't forget to subscribe to Coming the HFY, because the next story might break an even bigger ceiling.